Welcome to the Red Rose Film Club, a movie podcast that examines the wide world of cinema through a perpetually lefty pinko commie soy boy cuck Antifa super soldier filter. But more specifically, we love movies and want to create a podcast that would appeal to the disparate tastes of our liberal, leftist, socialist, communist, Marxist, and Leninist friends. Red Rose Film Club is for leftists of all stripes who don't know what to talk about at parties other than movies and politics. My name is Craig. I work in public education and am passionate about social justice and workers' rights. My tastes range, but mostly exist on opposite ends of the highbrow, lowbrow spectrum. And I'm with...
Hey, I'm Hal. I use she/they pronouns. I work in higher ed and I run a food pantry. I care about food access, reproductive justice, building a robust social welfare state, and ending the state's domination through the criminal legal system. I'm a staunch defender of cruising, and I like movies where Pacino is a little, or a lot, queer.
Yeah.
So, Craig, back at it again.
Yep.
What other pop culture are you getting into these days?
I have been reading, which for the first time I've made myself a bit of a New Year's resolution and have I know it's only March, but I've kept at it for maybe the longest I've kept at a resolution, which is to read more and try to finish at least a book a month. I don't know. Now I feel like I'm outing myself as a dum-dum. That felt like a low number to me, but
I don't think it is at all. I mean, I think that there are a lot of structural forces that drive us away from long-form reading.
Well, and also I'm not counting audiobooks because I still listen to audiobooks too, but like I'm trying to have more quiet time reading at home to like relax too. So that was also part of it. So I'm reading more.
Okay.
And
what are you
I'm
reading?
Currently reading two books. One is the fantasy series Throne of Glass. Do you know about that? By Sarah J. Maas.
I do not, but the title, anything that's like evoking Blondie and fantasy for me, that's going to be a yeah.
Hell yeah. So it's fun. It's a lot of fun. It is, it's fantasy, and it is this assassin is plucked. She's been like sentenced for crimes in which the book will explain, but she's been plucked from this work prison colony to compete in a series of games as the king's champion to like win her freedom. And there's like palace intrigue and like roiling sexy tension. And this woman, Sarah J. Maas, who wrote the books, apparently she's like, if you've been to a Books A Million or a Barnes & Noble, you've seen her books. They're everywhere. The Throne of Glass is like, I think her first, but she has two other ones. One's called A Court of, people are going to be so mad that I'm going to get this wrong, because I've also realized like she's got some hardcore stands on the internet as well, but it's called Court of Something series and then the Crescent City series.
Crescent City is ringing a bell.
Yeah, and apparently those are way hornier and smuttier than Throne of Glass, so
Court of Thorn and Roses.
There you go. Court of Thorn and Roses and the Crescent City, and apparently those are super smutty, in addition to being like fun fantasy. So once I get through all 8 of the Throne of Glass books, I'll have to move on to those. But I also want to talk about another book that I just got and am reading, but it is Trust the Plan, by Will Sommer of the Daily Beast.
Oh, yes.
And it is his book that he's been working on forever about QAnon and like the
QAnon
this
is
phenomenon.
Prime for you.
Yeah.
It's like this book was written personally
Yeah. So I
to
just
satisfy
got
your
I'm
interest.
only like 50 pages or so in, but I already love it and just want to talk about it because I love Will Sommer. He writes for the Daily Beast. He also does a great podcast called Fever Dreams, where like each week he just kind of breaks down a different like whatever is the current event in the MAGA sphere.
Right,
so, like,
the collective delusion that they're all
like his
engaged in.
beat is like MAGA cultdom. Like that is like anything related to like the creepier and weirder the like Trump thing is, like he's on it, and the QAnon is his.
Say the name of the book again.
It's Trust. It's got a really good subtitle too. Let me look it up. It's Trust the Plan. Here you can hear me typing. Trust the Plan.
Like a Kermit gif of just Kermit typing.
Yeah. Trust the Plan: The Rise of QAnon and the Conspiracy That Unhinged America.
Ooh,
it's good stuff.
Yeah, that sounds good. I look forward to your subsequent report.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. What about you? What have you been getting into?
Well, I have been in and out of town a little bit, so I haven't really been reading as much, but this last Friday, on March 17th, Apple Plus dropped a docuseries, a pretty short docuseries. I think there's only 6 episodes, called Monster Factory. And it's about Monster Factory is a wrestling school.
Oh.
In the Northeast, and it's about wrestlers training, and kind of the fight or the struggle to become a professional wrestler. I love wrestling, and I'm generally interested in kind of all iterations, like the media itself, or the product itself, but also media artifacts that are like a nonfiction perspective on it. Last year I read a book called The Struggle for Recognition, which is a sociological ethnographic study of independent
cool.
wrestlers. So I was interested in this, when it popped up on the feed. And Monster Factory, like I said, the name of the wrestling school and the name of the show, has trained wrestlers that have quote unquote made it. So I don't know if you've encountered like Damian Priest.
Oh, hell yeah. Judgment Day.
Yeah, exactly. In your WWE watching, or Womp Womp, I hate this motherfucker, but Matt Riddle.
That sounds crazy familiar to me, but
Bro,
was he an MMA guy before?
Maybe.
Okay.
But I mean, he's a piece of shit, and there's like all manner of reasons that he's a piece of shit that we don't need to get into right now. Like, he's a bad person.
Like in real life.
Yes, in real life, like has been accused of assault, and also was like accused of cheating on his wife with a trans woman who was a wrestler named Jamie, who he like denied having had affairs with, but there's like lots of evidence that he absolutely was. He's just not a good dude, but he wrestles for WWE and he came out of Monster Factory as well, and has pretty high degree of prominence. This whole thing is like that he wrestles without shoes, and he's a bro.
Okay.
He says bro a lot. Has long blonde hair, and he's big.
Oh, okay. I'm getting
like
a
he's
great
tall.
image of this person.
Yeah. And then also QT Marshall, which is kind of a joke. His name is QT Marshall, but there was like a thing in AEW where people pronounce it that way. And Preston Vance, who was 10, also known as 10 in AEW. And then there's a couple of other people too that are in other promotions like Impact or Ring of Honor, including Ian Riccaboni, who I like a fair amount. He's an announcer for Ring of Honor, but he's been on AEW stuff a little since Tony Khan purchased Ring of Honor. Like sometimes there's some bleed over there, and he's a good announcer. I dig him. But it's cool. There's only like 6 episodes, and it's just kind of following some of the trainees as they navigate that process and kind of the impact that it has on them and their lives to make so many sacrifices to engage in this kind of odd. Wrestling is kind of this weird thing that there's not a lot of comparison in other hobbies where it's like it's a hobby, but the sacrifice required demands that you view it as something more than that. Yeah. And so it's kind of people caught in this odd tension and trying to pursue getting a contract. And it also focuses on the guy who is the trainer and owns Monster Factory at this point in time.
What's his name?
Oh, God.
Mr. Monster?
Excuse me, Mr. Factory is my father.
That sounds awesome. I'm going to have to watch that.
Yeah, it's if you have access to Apple Plus or a way of watching things that is on Apple Plus, I definitely recommend it. And the episodes are like 29 minutes. Like, it's like a third. Like you can sit down and watch it in one day, which we did. Have you been watching any wrestling these last few weeks?
Yeah, I have. I'm in it now. The only thing is I texted you about this because I'm a little annoyed that I'm struggling to watch it live. I have Peacock, but then realized that it's only like month-old episodes on Peacock. So, just making do. So, yes, we're watching it live to Peacock. So I am staying up to date when Peacock gets the month-old episodes released. So, definitely following the Bloodline saga right now into that. My wife and
yeah.
I both have a hopeless crush on Rhea Ripley and Judgment Day in
sense.
general. Speaking of Damian Priest, that voice is killer. Damian Priest got a great voice,
He does.
very
He does.
velvety.
He, I like and also am kind of reviled by Damian Priest reflecting, like, he feels like an older era of wrestling. He feels
Uh-huh.
like someone that you would see at a bar in 2005,
For sure, yeah.
drinking a Monster.
Just the hair, the like
Yes.
look, the clothes,
The
yeah,
look.
yeah.
But I do like, I will say, his more recent aesthetic and like really um digging into it, like really
Yeah,
just
yeah.
committing to the bit, I like a lot more than when he first debuted on the main roster, because it was just
What was
kind
his
of,
like aesthetic then?
it was the same thing, but it was just like the light version. It was the Diet Coke version as
Yeah.
opposed to the full-bodied Coke. And
Yeah,
now
now he
he's
looks
like
like-
giving.
Yeah, he
you
looks
know?
like he would have been like one of the sexy people at the Vampire Club in like Blade 3.
Yes, or like he goes to Castle. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's a bar in Ybor that is like
Ooh.
vampire / BDSM theme,
Oh my
but
God.
like it's fun, and also the exact people that you would expect would be there
Okay.
are there, and that makes
Scientologists.
it not fun.
I've been to Ybor exactly 3 times. This
And
is
you always get caught up in the
every time I've been
Scientologists.
approached by a Scientologist. For those that might not know, Ybor is it's not a city. It's like a what do you
It's a neighborhood in Tampa.
a neighborhood in Tampa. Yeah, that's kind of like the hip, trendy area in Tampa.
It's also like a nightlife zone.
Yeah, for sure. But every time I've been there, I've been approached by a Scientologist. And I think it's because Clearwater is like right there.
Yeah,
which is,
and they do have an outpost.
Right.
in
And if you're gonna
Ybor.
if you're gonna try to get any new converts, the hipster section of Tampa is probably
Yeah, I think you can also just catch some people based on intrigue, because when I was in high school, I dated someone that lived in Tampa, and I lived a few hours south, and when I would drive up and visit him, we'd go walk around Ybor during the day, and one of those times, we were like, yeah, let's go. And so we sat in their theater and watched their introductory video. But I mean, the thing about Scientology, right, is that it's all, you have to spend money to move through the levels and to take classes.
right.
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
unless
Like
they're
any good religion.
right, like any good religion. So unless they're hooking you on like the emotional vulnerability level,
Right.
which I was not, that's
Right,
not
yeah, yeah,
who I was or what my life experience was as a 17-year-old.
Ooh, you
So
were
I had no
17.
interest.
I'm
Yeah.
glad that wasn't your experience, because that's 17 is a susceptible age to get sucked into a cult.
Yeah, they just,
So
if they had dressed really well or something and like wanted to talk to me about
Yeah.
art, and then were like, you can keep hanging out with us if you give us money, that may have,
Yeah.
hooked me. But just like a bunch of weirdos in a theater that had a few Scientology posters but was not otherwise jazzed up.
Yeah.
And then
instead of you can look at art, it's do you want to go on a boat for a year and not talk to your friends?
do you want to be therapized by someone who's not a therapist and
Oh,
has no
Jesus, yeah.
professional experience and is really just using that? Here's the other thing is, like, I was too politically radical and too aware
Right.
of
yeah,
them.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
You were on the.
I was for
it was
sure
never gonna work for them.
Yes, I for
Yeah.
sure knew who they were, and what they were doing
Right. Yeah.
prior to that point in time. So I was not ripe for the taking. But I'm sure you're right that there, are people drunkenly bebopping around Ybor who
Have reached
are gonna get
some
milked.
point that Scientology is the answer for now.
The other thing I wanted to bring up while we were talking about this is Scream 6.
Ooh, I haven't seen
Have
it
you
yet.
seen it
Dying
yet?
to see it.
Okay, well, I wouldn't say any spoilers anyway because it came out, so within
Right, yeah.
the last like 2 weeks. But I will say I liked it.
I've heard good things.
I felt pretty positive about it. What I said when I left the theater to the group of friends that I was with was that was not a good scary movie, but it was a good Scream movie. And not really frightening, but one of the things that I have historically liked about Scream movies is that they don't back away from the killer just being vile and vicious.
Right.
Like I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
when Ghostface is like saying disgusting things
Right,
when they're
yeah.
call, when they call, and that is absolutely something
Hell yeah.
that they don't pull away from, and it is very gory. Like, it's not gory in that like you're seeing the viscera, like it's body horror,
Sure.
right? But it is gory in that like people are being stabbed, you see the blood, and there's
Yeah.
again they don't. It's unflinching.
Yeah.
In its depiction of that. So I had a hoot and a holler.
I'm excited. Is it self-referential? Don't, if this becomes a thing,
Yeah.
don't spoil. But is it self-referential to the fact that Nev Campbell is not in this one?
They talk about why she is not there, and it is not made a joke.
Okay.
Like, there's an excuse. Like, they explain why she's not there, and it's not like
okay.
that fucking bitch. Like, it's not that kind of a thing.
I was wondering if they were gonna go like totally meta with it and have an entry about losing the like franchise star of your horror
No,
movie or something.
I mean, I think that there could have been a way, especially in light of the fact that she is not. Listener, if you're not aware, the reason why Nev Campbell is not in Scream 6, which is not a spoiler, has been very widely publicized in industry media, is because of failed contract negotiations. They wouldn't pay her whatever she was asking. And it's not super clear what that failure was or what it is relative to what David Arquette or she made, or I can't want to call him by the character's name, Courtney Cox made in the previous one, or what Courtney Cox or what's her fuck, Hayden Panettiere are, making in this one.
Yeah.
So that information is not known, at least publicly, but it is known that she said no because she was not satisfied with what they were offering her. And I think that there's a direction, especially given the nastiness that is kind of embedded in the Scream series, that they could have done something like she dies, or doing a meta approach. And it's very like shuts the door, like, this is why she's not here anyway, and here's what we're doing.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Now I'm interested again, because I thought I had a prediction in my head. You ever like think like, oh, this is probably what that's about, and then you're just like, that's what it is about until I know differently, and then you go see it and you're like, oh, I was completely wrong.
Yeah, I think
that's me now. I
think it's handled fairly gracefully, and that it's not lingered on, so that you're not spending the whole time going, well, where's Sidney?
Right. Yeah.
Why isn't Sidney here?
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked it.
Hell yeah.
I think it's like a solid 3 of 5 stars. Like,
solid 3 of 5. Where would you put it in the ranking of your screams?
Ooh, I'm so glad you asked. So Scream 1, Scream 2, Scream 1, Scream 2, Scream 3, Scream 6, Scream 4, Scream 5.
All right. 3's solidly at the bottom for me.
Oh,
I do not like Scream 3.
No.
Yeah, no. Mine would be 1, maybe 4. 1. I don't know. I like 4 and 2 a lot.
Yeah, 2 is really. I rewatched it with a friend that was staying with us this weekend after we saw it, and I hadn't seen that in 10 years. I don't know, like probably since high school, honestly, and was really delighted with how good
and
it still
2 has
is.
the best cold open too.
Yes, it does, absolutely.
I'm trying to remember what the cold open is in 5. I can remember all the other ones. 1 is Drew Barrymore in the popcorn.
Right.
2's the movie theater.
Right, with Jada Pinkett Smith.
3 is Cotton Weary getting killed.
Yeah.
4 is the like referential keep zooming out because it's a movie and a movie and a movie.
Yes.
And I don't remember what 5 is.
Yeah, 5 in general is just pretty forgettable.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, but it is like,
I mean, here's the other thing that I will say. My big takeaway from 6 is most of these bitches can't act. There are exceptions to it. I like Mason Gooding, Cuba Gooding Jr.'s son.
Okay.
He's in the previous one too. Yeah, I like Jasmine, whose last name I'm forgetting, but she's in Yellow Jackets.
Okay.
I'm a fan of her. The Jenna Ortega is fine. Solidly fine. I don't feel strongly either way. Melissa Barrera, the main older sister, a horrible actress. I really, really don't like her acting, and I find it to be like distractingly bad. Like it's not campy bad. It's just like feels like it's going for emotional weight that her
It's
shoulders
not there.
can't carry.
Yeah.
But so I think that makes the more recent series that weakens it for me relative to some of the others. And yeah, I agree that 5 is kind of forgettable on the whole. Like the thing that I find most notable about it are the two killers.
Yes. I'm forgetting who.
It's
we can run Scream 5, right? It's
right. I mean,
Jack.
Hey, so yeah, I was gonna say, don't listen for 15 seconds. Jack Quaid.
Yeah.
And the woman who is Squeaky Fromme in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Oh shit, I don't remember who that is.
The dark-haired, pale-skinned girl who's like screaming and going fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And Brad Pitt like sets the dog on her.
Hell yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she's just good at playing a psycho.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm remembering now.
Because it's like Scream 5 ends with, they're secretly boyfriend and girlfriend who are trying to recreate it behind Melissa Barrera's character's back, who had been dating Jack Quaid. Yeah. So it's like their performances and all of that fun stuff and Dewey's death are what like stick out to me from those movies, that movie, as opposed to all of the fighter details. But you gotta see 6. It's worth it. I liked it more than 5.
I'm excited. Very excited. Well, moving on, what's happening in the world this week that's either got you celebrating or in despair?
I feel like this section just becomes like me ranting about Ron DeSantis. So I'm not gonna rant because I'm tired. I worked out before this, hit a PR on my power snatch.
Hell yeah.
And did double unders for the first time while
What's
jump roping. Like when you
double
double. Yes.
That seems advanced. I couldn't imagine.
It was hard. So I'm a little lower energy than I might usually be. So I'm not going to yell, but what I will say is last week there was a Harper's Magazine article that came out as part of their March 2023 issue called See No Evil, that is replicating an interview between a former Gitmo detainee and a like U.S. military veteran. Those are two separate people, right? That they're talking to each other about torture happening at Gitmo, and Ron DeSantis's role in that. And that apparently when he was a JAG officer for at least part of the time, it was his job to oversee the force feeding of Gitmo detainees who were on a hunger strike.
Damn.
And the vile detail, I mean, I don't think there's any question for anyone who is politically aware and politically engaged and lives in Florida about like the depths of depravity, but I think that, I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like for our generation who came to political awareness during the Iraq invasion, which we hit the 20th year anniversary of this week, in fact.
Oh shit.
Wow. Yeah, or the end of last week, but it's like very recently. That there's a lot of really evil, sick, twisted culture war, or what people, I kind of put quotation marks around it because I mean abortion is an economic issue, attacking queer people is an economic issue, like these things too, but we conceive of them kind of as culture war issues, right? That it's easy to forget or maybe not focus on for a period of time that neocons and the Republican Party that they ushered in are war hawks that are engaged in a necropolitic that is about deciding who gets to live and who gets to die, and that has wide sweeping implications for people's lives and their life expectancy and their quality of life, and whether or not they're actively being tortured and having ensured force fed down their throats until they shit themselves, which is what's described in this article. That they're engaged in that project too, and that they were played a major role in advancing that necropolitic. Though to be clear, Democrats did as well. Like they're not out of it, but I just think like I don't know. It really for me kind of pulled some more of the veil off in the sense of like he's vile on public education, he's vile on queer people, he's vile on criminalizing trans folks, he's vile on issues of abortion, he's vile on issues of like homeowners insurance, which is a whole special thing in Florida that we don't need to get into, right? But like also he's actually the devil,
cruel on such a more personal level than anyone
like on
understood.
A fucking war crimes level,
right.
like on a literal human rights violation level. And I would honestly, major content warning for that article, like don't go look it up if it's not something that you can handle. But I think that we have to be clear when we joke about, oh, he's wearing his big goofy suit that he doesn't fit in like a toddler, and he's advancing this cruel policy platform that's like, he's been this way. He came up through institutions of higher ed that are intended to cultivate cruelty. And then he embarked on a career where he cultivated and enacted cruelty. And he's attempting to do that everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, what does foreign policy look like under his administration of a man that was laughing in the face of people who were vomiting and shitting themselves because they were being force-fed Ensure while they were using the one form of disruptive protest that they had, which was deciding what was happening to their bodies via a hunger strike while they were being tortured by the American empire. Like, he is the American empire. He is a perfect encapsulation of it. And yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
I mean, heavy, but yeah. Damn. Yeah. I mean, it is, I guess, just shocking to be reminded that, like, I feel like too often, at least for me, I take a lot of, because I have an unhealthy obsession with, like, right-wing morons who are just grifting and saying shit for the money. Like, I think too often I discount the, like, abject cruelty of some of them and just, like, write it off as, he's playing the part, he's getting the votes, getting the base, but no, then it's, I think, important to be reminded that, no, oftentimes they're just cruel people.
That's who it is.
Yeah.
That's who he is. Yeah, and I agree. Like, I think an example of this is, like, the recent stuff that he's done with New College.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say something that's, like, maybe a little controversial. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. That I think that he is specifically, and to me, it's obviously targeting New College because it's a arena in which he knows he can win, right? There's a reason that he's not attempting to the same degree and in the same way take over Florida State University,
right,
or University of Florida, or FAU, or UCF, which have, like, collectively hundreds of thousands of students enrolled, and then an alumni network that exceeds hundreds of thousands, maybe in the millions if we're doing it all combined, right? Whereas New College has 700 people and has had students active and has been dwindling in enrollment for a decade. And it's because he knows he is a fucking smart man, and has made a cost-benefit analysis of the cost of doing this is lower than the overall benefit, even if I lose. Because even if he loses, he still gets to stir up the base. He still gets to waste a bunch of activists and students' time, and so I think sometimes it seems like some of the things he's doing are just really so politically driven that the underlying ideology of them maybe is second to their like political expediency. But then there's things like this where it's like, no, he's evil. And I think the same thing is true of trans people. I want to make it clear. I'm not saying this is the only thing that makes me feel this way about DeSantis. I just mean like, this is a broader scope. Like, this is situated in a bigger, broader nexus than just what's happening in Florida. So I wanted to share it, not because I think we have listeners that are like, well, DeSantis is a good guy, but like understanding the how deeply it penetrates him and his career. You know, I mean, this is 20 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Crazy. Damn.
yeah. Sorry. So
No,
what?
good.
What?
What? Boy. So I'm realizing I probably should have gone first here because I was heavy. Because mine is baseball's almost back, so now we got to make a hard transition. But
That's okay. I think a vibe shift is in order.
This might be cheating because this could have been my what am I getting into instead of my current event. But I love baseball.
I support. I think
All right,
again
hell yeah.
we need a little bit of counterweight
So
here.
the Major League Baseball hasn't officially started yet, but what has been going on is the World Baseball Classic. Are you familiar with the World Baseball Classic?
No, you should pretty much assume that I'm not familiar with much of
So,
anything when
the
it
wor-
comes to baseball.
The World Baseball Classic is like the World Cup, but for baseball. Like they do it every several years, and every country, like not every country, but there's
okay, I was like, what are there like 7 countries? It's like I know that
So
I know
there's,
that
like-
baseball is popular in Japan. I
there's
know
like
that's
18,
popular.
but 3 are good.
Okay.
Would you like to guess the 3? You've got one.
So Japan, I know
Yep.
that baseball is popular in some countries in the Caribbean.
And that's going to be
so
one
I'm
of
gonna
yours.
guess
Which one?
The DR,
That's the
the Dominican Republic.
Again, this is not necessarily how the World Baseball Classic is shaking out, but traditionally these 3
Right.
teams are usually
and,
the ones.
And the third is it the U.S.
It's
or you're
the
saying
US, yeah,
okay?
yeah. So the U.S., Japan, and the DR are like usually the dominant ones. There's been some upsets, but the one that I want to talk about is Team Mexico and Randy Arozarena. Do you know who Randy
Ooh,
Arozarena is?
I do not, but
So-
I love. There's some beautiful assonance happening there. Like
Oh my God, he's great.
Yeah.
There's some beautiful, yes, and his name has beautiful assonance. He's just a beautiful little soul. If you're a baseball fan, you can't help but love him. More
does
importantly,
he play in the MLB?
hell yeah, he does, and he plays for my favorite team, which is why I've already primed to love him. He's a Tampa Bay Rays player.
Okay.
He has this really crazy story. Well, first off, he's only been in the league since 2020. His first year was the COVID year. And
Is he baby?
he's youngish. He's probably like 25, 26. Still young for a baseball player, yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah,
he
you don't age out at 30.
I mean, some of them do.
Right.
But yeah, no, not like
it's not like football.
it's not like football
Yeah.
where like you're gonna use up the first 2 years and then be done. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like the Justin Verlander's in his 40s at this point and still throwing.
Does he play for the Rays?
No, he is.
I
who's
recognize
Justin-
the name.
Yeah, he dates a famous person.
The
He-
model, right?
Yeah, Kate. No,
Yeah.
not Moss. That's
No,
from the 90s.
not Kate
Upton,
Moss.
Kate Upton.
Yes, Kate Upton.
He started with Verlander started with the Tigers, and then he made a lot
Okay.
of noise because he won 2 championships with the Astros, and now I believe in like the twilight of his career, he's with the Mets.
Okay, that sounds right because baseball is definitely one of those things that my relationship to it is entirely defined by people I have relationships with
Being
caring
into it,
about
yeah.
baseball. Like I, growing up, would go to spring training games of the Braves because
Right.
we lived outside of
South
Tampa,
Florida,
and
yeah,
it was I don't know if they still do, but at the time they were in Orlando.
Yeah. Well, Florida is like the spot.
Right,
for
and then
spring training.
yes, exactly, which makes sense, right? Because it's not snowing.
Yeah.
And then because we lived in Brandon at the time, we went to some Rays games, though that's before they lost their nerve and were known as the Devil Rays.
Oh yeah.
Um,
And then, but hey, the year they took the Devil out is the first year they went to the World Series. So hey,
Yeah, I guess we gotta raise the hex, but
they do still when they do the throwback jerseys, they still says Devil. They'll
It
have the
should,
Devil
'cause
Rays.
that
it was
is-
a cooler logo for sure.
it is a
Yeah,
cooler
yeah.
logo, and I also think the Rays, like that purple with that like kind of
Purple
almost
and green.
rainbow that they
Yep.
would have in those stripe was good and chic. Also, my parents went to the first Rays game ever in Tropicana because
Hell
we
yeah.
again
I was
lived
there
in
the first
Brandon.
season in '98, but I
Nice.
have not the first game.
Not the first game.
Yeah.
Yes, there's pictures of my parents in the first
Hell
game.
yeah.
And then, I have a friend that's a big Mets person, so that's probably why I've heard that. And then my husband likes the Yankees, which is
Okay.
just an eternal battle between him and our friends who do not like the Yankees.
Yeah. It is like, I mean, the Yankees are easy to hate in the sense that like all legacy teams are easy to hate, but it's harder to hate now because they have a firm like stable of pretty likable dudes. Whereas in like the late 2000s and 2010s, it was just a murderer's
Just
row of
douchebags.
shitheads.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
just
it was
douchebags.
so easy to hate the Yankees 10, 15 years ago.
I will say one of my most controversial, and this is why I don't judge my husband for liking the Yankees, but one of my most controversial sports opinions is that I don't think that there's anything wrong with being a bandwagoner.
Yeah, I probably as like a younger person, I would have been like, nah, man, because you feel like that's your
Yeah, well, and I mean, there are good social functions
yeah.
of people feeling strongly tied to other people as it relates to sport teams,
Yeah.
right? But personally, as someone that does not give a shit, I just want things to be good. Like
Yeah.
when people are bad, it's not fun to watch. And I am not in it for the long haul narrative.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah,
so
you
I just
wanna
want.
see, yeah.
Yeah, it's like it was so exciting in the fall. Went to a or was it in the fall? I don't know. Whatever. Relatively recently, we went to my husband and I went to that Jacksonville Jaguars game
Oh,
that was
that's
just
cool.
like insane. What was the first round of the playoffs? That was just insane. Trevor
Oh,
Lawrence threw
nice.
like 3 interceptions
Not good.
in like the first quarter.
Well, that's really not good.
And it was real scary. And then they came back from it, and it was just the most exciting show. I was like, this is
Hell
sport.
Yeah.
This
yeah,
is sport ball that I am interested in. Is when people are
Hell
just
yeah.
doing nuts shit. I don't care who's winning.
Yeah, well, then I would recommend watching the Rays, specifically Mr. Randy Arozarena, because he's had several moments like that that were just like, this is sport, this is great. Specifically in 2020, he had a great, he was the go-ahead, like, end of the game run where he had like a sliding head first into home plate, and he has
Amazing.
like, I gotta find this picture because this dude is like, he's got $1 million smile, and there's a great image from that 2020 like it was either the playoffs or the World Series. Oh my god, I typed $1 million smile instead of Randy Arozarena smile.
What position does he play?
He is an outfielder, but he's versatile as hell. And he's just a character. Like he wears cowboy boots in the dugout constantly.
See,
Like
yeah,
big,
that's what
like
I
not
want.
in the game because you're not allowed to, but like he'll just before the game kick around in his cowboy boots. And for Team Mexico, because I'll get into this, he's not Mexican, but he's playing for Team Mexico because he has found a newfound love for Mexico because he's Cuban, and there are a lot of good Cuban baseball players, but Cuba is not a great place to be a baseball player.
Okay.
One, they don't get in the World Baseball Classic a lot, and Randy Arozarena, the last time they were and he was eligible, they were afraid that he would defect and didn't let him play. So like he just wanted to play baseball, and I saw something that like in the level that he was at in Cuban baseball at age 19, he was making like $4 a week or something crazy. So
Oof.
for various numbers of reasons, for him and his family, they left Cuba and went to Mexico, and like he moved his mom and his sisters to Mexico, and now his family lives in Mexico. And a few years ago, he was like didn't have a team because he couldn't play for Cuba. He didn't have a team, and he tweeted out at the Mexican president like, "Yo, let me join the Mexican team. My family loves it there." And they were like, "Okay." So this year he's playing for the Mexico team, and he's shown up with his cowboy boots and a luchador mask that he just parades around in.
Amazing. Okay, I'm
And,
definitely gonna look this up. I
And
love a
he's
lucha.
been, well, they just got eliminated, but he's been absolutely killing it. His, I'm gonna throw off some stats. I'm sorry, I don't want to be that annoying, but he's hitting 450 in the World Baseball Classic, so like just under 500, which is amazing. He's had 9 RBIs. He had like a late game homer. He's had a 600 on base percentage. He had this wild moment where he caught a ball at the wall. Yeah. Hal's pull up pictures of him parading around in his luchador mask.
Steez. Okay, this is a look. Him in a luchador mask with a baseball cap on top of it, gold chains, and a Mexico jersey.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Whew.
And one of the funniest things, like he does great takes. He just has like a natural sense for like drama, and he had a great catch at the wall where he went up, basically robbed a home run, came down, and just didn't have any expression on his face and just went and just stared into the middle distance for a few seconds. And like he's just great. Like I love him, and I'm super jazzed for baseball to start because he'll be on my favorite team, and baseball is always great, and I love it.
Hell yeah. I just looked up to see. I like Defector a lot. Do you ever read Defector stuff? Do you know? They're a sports site.
Oh, that
I
sounds.
got into them because they did it a lot during lockdown. They do it less frequently now, but they used to, and again, sometimes still do, on Thursdays on Twitch do trivia.
Okay.
Like they play like a trivia, a Defector Jeopardy, basically with different writers, whatever. So I like got into it because my husband was like, "No, watch this," and it's not all sports related, though some of it is. But whenever I have a sports inquiry, I like to go to them to
Yeah.
see. But it's impossible to search this man's name and Defector because it's just people
Yeah.
using
Yeah,
references to his journey.
And
to
before we move
Mexico.
on, I do want to show the picture, but because it's a great image, if you've ever seen it, of him
Oh,
like
wow.
in the playoffs of the World Series, like sliding in for the game-winning run.
That's
and
good.
Just kind of staying on home plate with his big smile on his face. Like he's great. He's like what makes baseball players great is somebody that like clearly loves baseball and like just enjoys like the spirit of it and can kind of have a little bit of fun with the drama. He's just great. I love him.
Yeah, I mean, baseball's just always gonna, for me, have the limit of what the sport actually is. I've moved a lot on the matter of football. I can even watch golf on occasion. Like, there are some sports that I've been able to massage some interest in. But baseball just takes too fucking long, and
try?
there's too. Sure, yeah.
First off, if you're worried about that, they have this year is the first year they're instituting the pitch clock. So like shot clock in NBA. So now
Right.
like like there's baseball fans are a lot of ways about it, but this year there's a pitch clock. So like pitchers can't take forever because baseball is also aware that the games take too long and have been
Oh, yeah.
trying to find ways to speed them up.
Do you watch Game Theory, the Bomani Jones?
Bomani Jones, I've seen just a episode here or
HBO.
there. Yeah.
The most recent episode, he talks about the problem of baseball viewership because it's been
Yeah.
on a
On the
really
decline,
steady
yeah.
decline for basically people of our generation specifically. Yeah, I don't know. It's also it's like I think baseball wrestles from an issue for me personally where I don't if it's on TV, I would rather be doing anything else.
Okay.
And if I'm watching it in person, I can't see most of
Right,
the
what's going
action
on.
that
Yeah,
would
yeah,
make
yeah.
me interested in it. So I've just kind of been this double bind of like and a sport that can't be made significantly better by me being drunk at it is a hard
Oh, you gotta try
is a
harder.
hard sell for me. I will say like 2 summers ago I went to a Cubs game in Chicago while visiting a friend, and it was it was dollar hot dog day, and that is about the closest I've ever gotten to giving a shit because I love hot dogs. Also, a really, really funny episode occurred in front of us where a group of bros each got a hot dog, and one of the mans opened his hot dog and there was no hot dog in the bun, and he literally looked like he was going to cry.
I would too, honestly.
And stood up and went, "There's no hot dog!" And he was wasted. Like, they were all very drunk and didn't just go like find the hot dog man. So I'm gonna remember that for the rest of my life. So shouts out to the Cubs for
Hell yeah.
giving me that. Was it the Cubs or was it the White Sox? I don't know. It was in Chicago.
Ooh, do not say that out loud in Chicago. Jesus Christ.
One time that we've gone to Chicago, we went to a White Sox game, and the other time we went to a Cubs
game,
and I
yeah.
can't remember which is which, but
Hell yeah.
it was.
Can I give you my better argument for why baseball is? You don't have to take it. You can
Yes.
continue to
Yeah,
think baseball is boring.
I'm here to receive it.
But I love baseball because it's one of the only sports where the play is almost always live, right? So like
What do you mean by that?
all the pacing, the walking around, the pitcher doing his like bullshit, like the play is live. Like shit can be happening, and there's like little mini games that I find like the way the pitcher and the batter interact, and the idea of like how are you going to approach this batter? Like I just love it. It's just always, to me, there's always like some sort of dramatic thing happening, even when they're just pacing around and like getting ready to pitch.
I will say that pitching is the most interesting
Yes,
part
I love
of
watching
the game to
a great
me.
pitcher
Yeah.
and like seeing their strategy, how they're going to pitch to certain guys, especially if they're good hitters, It's great. I love
Yeah,
it.
it's also kind of gymnastic. There's like a flow to it.
Yeah, for sure.
That
Yeah.
feels. I think the other thing is like I grew up playing soccer, and soccer is the sport of the people, right? Like you can play soccer anywhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
and baseball has reflections of that.
Sure.
Like certainly more so than something like lacrosse,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Or hockey. But it just doesn't flow in the same way
Sure. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
soccer does. So I think just things that involve a lot of standing around, there's just still a part of my brain that's like, you could be running right now, sir. Like, why don't you get down and do some
But the
push-ups?
unspoken
Why don't
rules.
you, like,
Are you a fan of the unspoken rules of baseball? I love all that.
if they are not spoken, I'm probably not aware of them.
But that's what I love is like because there's so many unspoken rules. Like even amongst the players, like fights will break out, and you'll be like, "What the hell?" And then you'll be like, "Oh, that guy stepped on the line in a way that was disrespectful." There's a great one.
Here's what I'll say: if there were more fights, I would be more interested.
Oh, but when there are fights in baseball, they are barn burners.
Yes, and I do like a bench clear.
Hell yeah.
You know?
One of my favorite like unwritten rules, like abrupt chaos, and also because the target is so deserving, is Alex Rodriguez, A-Rod. He was it was Dallas Braden, who was a pitcher for the Oakland Athletics. This is probably like 2011, 2012. He threw a perfect game at one point, but he was never like a gold star pitcher or anything. But so an unwritten rule of baseball is you do not walk on the pitcher's mound.
Okay.
Like if you get thrown
it's
out
his
of
domain.
like that is their space, that is their like area. It is disrespectful. Like if you get thrown out at first, you should walk around the base path. Like in your dugouts on the other side, you should walk around. So Alex Rodriguez being a jerk, he got out at first and walked across the mound. And normally it's A-Rod at the height of A-Rod, so no one's gonna say anything. But little old corny Dallas Braden, you could read his lips. He's going, "Get off my fucking mound!" and just chasing him back to his dugout, screaming at him, which I love.
I mean, I do love stuff like that. Like I love the guy that pitched the perfect game on acid.
Hell
or
yeah.
like when Randy
Doc,
Johnson
hit that bird.
hit that bird.
Hell yeah.
R.I.P. to that bird. Sorry to that bird, but yeah, I can appreciate that, but I think it's like the highlights reel of baseball is more appealing to me.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But I'm certainly experiencing, relative to my life, a renaissance or a refined interest in sport. As I've been saying, I'm in my jock era.
Hell yeah.
I've been playing volleyball. It ended yesterday.
Oh shit! How'd you do?
Oh, our team is horrible, but that's not the
fun.
Yeah, exactly. That's not the point. Really, the thing with a thing like that is that, do you have the ability to rally such that you're not missing the ball every single time,
Right,
or
yeah,
there's
yeah.
no interactivity? So if you're good enough that there's some degree of interactivity, it's fun. It's the same with our kickball team. I would say we were about as good at volleyball as our kickball team was
Hal
good
and I
at
are a kickball team, by the way, if we haven't mentioned that before. So let's start heading towards discussing the movie we're here to talk about today. But before we do, we're gonna do a kind of edited top 3 because the movie we're here to discuss, Dog Day Afternoon, features a performance by the great John Cazale.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. A character actor from the 70s who would have gone on to a great illustrious career, I'm sure, but died of cancer in the late 70s and only ended up doing 5 movies and like was in 5 like all-time great movies. He was in Dog Day Afternoon, Godfather 1 and 2, The Conversation, and The Deer Hunter. So instead of our top 3, he's only got 5. Hal, what's your favorite what's your favorite Godfather movie? What's your favorite John Cazale performance?
My favorite Godfather movie is Godfather 2. But I will just say his performance across the 2 Godfather films that he is in particular, I will say the moment that sticks out most to me that I think about all the time, that when I am watching Godfather 2, I go, oh man, just a moment, is when Michael, or Al Pacino's character, is talking to him in the pool house
Oh yeah.
before ultimately Michael makes the ultimate decision to say goodnight to his brother. And John Cazale is just like draped across a chair in this pool house while Michael is, kind of berating him or trying to convince him to be a better person, basically. And he just is so deeply pathetic while still being intriguing and engaging. Like, you're still interested in like what he has to say, what he's going to do next. He's still compelling while just being like a fucking sad sack of shit.
Yeah.
In a really impressive way.
Yeah, and I love, I'm trying to think my favorite of his moments in The Godfather, but I love, I think it's Godfather 2, where, like, he arranges the meeting in Las Vegas, and Michael shows up, and it, like, immediately goes sideways, and he's just, again, in that, like, stewing in that, like, pathetic, I screwed everything up, I thought this was going to go well, and his, like, performance of just, like, being a moron, but also, like, kind of bringing a lot of, like, weight and emotion to, like, you feel bad for him in a way because he's such a screw up. I mean, honestly, Fredo has a lot of DNA with Sal and Dog Day Afternoon. Like,
well, there's a major thread in Fredo's characterization is a guy whose circumstances expect more of him than he can give.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I think, we'll get into it, but is true of Sal, where it's like in different ways, right? Like, Sal wants to be supportive and is sacrificing himself in service of someone he cares about, whereas Fredo is the opposite way, that he thinks he's being so clever and engineering
and he's just
the situation, but he's fucking dumb as shit and doesn't understand the implications of what he's doing, and therefore backs himself and then by extension his whole family and a criminal enterprise into a corner.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I think there is that like shared
simpleton that has like a grandiosity to them that they'll never achieve or whatever.
Yeah, that just kind of misjudges. You know how like the dude abides? It's like the dude does not abide, right? Like he is a man not made for his circumstance, basically.
Right. Yeah. Well, mine is, and that's why I wanted you to go first, because we're going to move right into it, is my favorite of his performances is as Sal in Dog Day Afternoon. So we could go ahead and get into it if you'd like.
Yeah, before we do that, you want to do some
promo? Yes, let me say this before I forget, like I've done several times. If you are listening, which some of you are, we're discovering, and that's lovely, could you please make sure to rate, review, do all those things that the algorithm gods demand. Please share all those things. We would love it. It would mean so much. So let's get into the movie Dog Day Afternoon. So before we dive into the movie itself, I think it's important to note that this movie is based on a true story, and how you did some research on the real Sonny Wartzik, a man named John Mashtowitz. What can you tell us about this fella?
So I think that this is a man that ends up accidentally embodying like many queer identity quandaries of the transition from the 20th century into the 21st century. Like, he just kind of accidentally ends up embodying like, what does it mean to wrestle with someone identifying as a transvestite versus transsexual versus transgender? What does it mean for a man to have a sexual identity or a sexual orientation identity that is different from what his behavior is? Or like, he just kind of encapsulates all these big identity questions related to gender and sexual orientation in America during a prime time, a prime fight for queer rights.
Yeah, and just to be clear, the movie is a loose adaptation. Like, there are of the real story, you know, the John I'm going to screw up the name. John Mashtowitz really did hold up a bank. The large kind of swaths are true,
Yeah.
and then some of the more nuanced parts of his story are not, or are embellished or downplayed or whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. And we kind of I'll seed some of those in as we talk about the actual plot of things that are different, but we'll say that the movie is based on a Life, like the magazine Life, article from 1972 called The Boys in the Bank, which I just want to say is a legendary title. Like I was
It's
like
really
at
good,
my
yeah.
desk, like clap, 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 clap. If you're not familiar, listener, there is a very famous play and movie called Boys in the Band that is about gay men at kind of like wrestling with not really their identities, but more so like the entanglements and consequences of their identities in an anti-gay world, and like their sexual behavior and drug use and all of these things. So I was delighted that the article is called The Boys in the Bank. But some other things I found is that I do say this movie, when we try and situate it in the film of the time, that it made $56 million box office
Wow.
at the time,
Yeah.
which is almost $300 million now. Can you
That's
imagine a like mid-budget drama for adults making $300 million right now?
No.
It's fucking crazy.
Yeah. No. I can't.
Yeah.
Will it ever happen again?
Right.
Yeah.
Check back in 20 years, right? But also John received $7,500 for use of his story.
Okay.
And ultimately about a third of that went to Eden, which is his non-legal wife.
Gotcha. Leon in the movie.
Yes, Leon in the film. For her gender affirming surgeries after the fact. So even though robbing the bank did not fulfill that function, ultimately he was able to share funds with her. It also seemed like from a lot of the interviews and stuff I was reading that he was living a really complex life, in that his legal wife, whose name was Carmen, in real life, said that he spent most weekends and all holidays with her and their children, and then kind of during the week was living a gay queer life.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of this is a very interesting man with an interesting life, and that we'll talk about it. I want to say this because I don't see it fitting into this, but that this man was his politics are very like confused, confounding, and contradictory.
Yeah.
And it comes in the movie. It comes into play. We see a lot of the references to Attica and the people kind of forming in the crowd, and that this is a very like the people getting behind him from the perspective of class conflict, but he was not so straightforward.
Yeah, and I think
in that regard,
and I do feel like the movie kind of like hints at that without going too implicit. Like it does seem like he doesn't quite understand like the implications of the Attica prison rebellion, but he does recognize them as being like a class struggle, and in that moment it is like expedient to him. So yeah, I do feel like the movie is like he's not political, he's politically aware enough to like use them to whatever means he needs or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that there's also something like sometimes you hear people say things like queer identity is inherently political, and it's pretty easy to understand that in the context of right now, right, where we have, for example, DeSantis or Tennessee, right, Texas trying to criminalize being a drag queen, which we know is like really just an effort to criminalize trans people.
Yeah.
But I feel like there was a period of time for a little while, maybe not very long, where we saw progression towards homonormativity where that wasn't necessarily true, right? Like you could in some places for some period of time, for the most part, be partnered with someone of the same gender as you and get married and own a house and kind of progress along the natural middle class trajectory.
Right.
And this is way before all of that. And so by nature of him being, by his own, the actual man, John's own admission, a bisexual who generally preferred sexually to be with men and had many quote unquote wives of a variety of genders, legal and not, over the years, that is inherently political because of the treatment of it by other people, regardless of his own political perspective.
Right. Yeah.
Like there's an interview from the early 2000s where he refers to himself as a Goldwater Republican. Okay.
Oh yeah, and the mom says one of my favorite lines in the movie is when he calls his mom after all the like shit has popped up, and she goes, "I told him what a sweet boy you are, Sonny. I told him you voted Goldwater in '64."
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
And so that's something that he maintained. A little tidbit that I found in one of the or written across a couple of different sources was that he was, in tension with queer people in his own community at the time. He seemed to have some ties to the mafia in New York, and in particular, there are some stories recounted of there was a mafioso named Mike Umber who owned a stake in the in Stonewall Inn, and also owned the Star House. Star being the street transaction action revolutionaries that Marsha P. Johnson was associated with, and Sylvia Rivera, and that this mafioso like evicted Star at some point in time from this house. And that there were protests regarding like a landlord conflict with him, and that John showed up to this protest with a sign that said Umber, again, Mike Umber being the mafioso, is good.
Okay.
Right? And he's also been recorded as saying things like, I trust the mafia because at least they gave us a space where we could be out.
Yeah, sure.
Because I guess the mafia, in addition to these things, owned other gay clubs and nightlife spaces in New York at the time. So it kind of just seemed like you said, almost he's a man who is a little fluid. He's fluid in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
He kind of moved to wherever he could exist.
He is clever. He's not smart.
Yeah,
I
sure.
think is a good. Also, have you seen The Dog, the documentary about John Majtowicz?
I have not, but I was delighted to. Let me share this before you, because I would love to hear about it. But I did not know that he called himself the Dog until I was doing some of these investigations, because there's an interview, like I said, from the early 2000s. It was recorded in 2001, but it was published in 2003 by the Journal of Bisexuality, where in this interview, John says, first of all, I learned he was a Pisces, so shouts out to Pisces.
Aquarius over here.
And I highly recommend reading it because as a sampling of this, he says, I was born in March 9th, 1945. I tell everyone I won World War II because Hitler heard the dog was coming.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
So tell me about the documentary, The Dog.
Oh, I'm a horrible person to ask about a movie that I saw 10 years ago because I remember almost nothing, but it is a documentary about John and just what a character he is. Like, I remember some of the stuff about like his loose involvement with the mafia and just kind of what a wild character he is. And he is featured in it, like being interviewed and things, and he's a nut. Yeah, he's wild.
I mean, but you have to be, regardless of what you think, whether you think that, yes, pursuing robbing a bank to help fund your transgender girlfriend's surgeries.
Who's made it clear they're sick of you, which I think is a great scene between them towards the end. But yes.
Yeah, there definitely seems some of the real life stuff, some conflict over, because I mean, the lead up, which is talked about in the movie, but the lead up into him doing this, it sounds like he was engaged in some other form of illicit,
right? Yeah.
Economic transaction, shall we say, to try and raise funds for her because her birthday was coming up, and then she attempted suicide when the funds did not come through by swallowing barbiturates, and then her friends took her to the hospital, which then led to her being in the psychiatric ward, which is where the story picks her up, right?
Yeah.
So that's real.
Chris Sarandon is really good in this. I know we're going to talk a little Chris Sarandon and the choice to cast them in it, but Chris Sarandon is really good in this. Those few scenes are great.
Yeah, it's there. I think there's a lot of interesting narrative choices that Sidney Lumet makes in terms of giving us little bits of taste of characterization that don't occupy the whole film. You know, like they feel really dense and kind of flavorful.
Yeah.
Despite like how little ultimate like exposure there is across the 2 hours and 5 minutes.
Yeah. That's a great flavorful. That's a really good way to put it, because there are like great moments of just like character building in such short amount of time. But yeah. So, do we want to dive into the movie proper?
Let's do it.
So, Dog Day Afternoon from the legendary filmmaker Sidney Lumet is a bank robbery gone wrong almost from the jump. Al Pacino and John Cazale play Sonny and Sal, two bumbling small-time crooks whose botched robbery turns into an all-out media spectacle. Unlike many heist films that emphasize the planning of the robbery and the execution, Dog Day Afternoon begins with the robbery after a montage of kind of the bustling New York day. And I love like one of the first things that happens is the third man is like, I can't do it, Sonny. I'm sorry. And just like immediately an omen for how the rest of this robbery is going to go.
Yeah, there is no part of it going well.
Right, yeah.
Off the bat,
and
right?
I think what we're going to talk about a lot is how well I think John Cazale plays that. From minute one, John Cazale knows this is not going to end well. This is not going to end the way we thought it was.
Sweating.
Yeah, he sweats so much in this movie.
Yes, he is wet.
Yeah, he is just a wet. Yeah, they had to have like a John Cazale wet assistant, just like spritz him. Yeah.
I will say before, if we could take half a step back, because we're only half a step forward, I want to ask what you think about really two things, I guess.
Yeah.
The first thing, so I'll pose both. The first is it opening with these just short vignettes of New York to establish the city as a character, and to situate the action. And then the second thing is that the movie has very little music or non-dialogue, right, or non-situated sound in it, but it starts with that Elton John song that is non-diegetic, that then becomes diegetic in the car until Pacino switches it off. So just kind of thinking about that like opening scene, there's a lot of interesting stuff going in there, I think.
Yeah, because the opening like sequence is just kind of like mundane shots of New York, and I think like a lot of the movie is obviously the media spectacle and how like America craves a spectacle. And also I think there's a lot of elements that are like how Americans want to inject themselves into the spectacle. So I do feel like that the opening montage is kind of the setting the tone of like in like a spy movie where they start from space and then they zoom in so you get situated. Like we're starting way out so you can see like what the world is like, kind of almost craving this like chaos. The quiet that like craves the chaotic moment or whatever. Yeah, what do you think about the?
I think there's also an element that's like New York is a mess.
Yeah.
You know, that there's just this sense that kind of everything is disheveled, because to me that's kind of a reoccurring theme throughout the movie. It's like there's really no one that is functioning at optimal level
normally
here,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It's like the cops and
oh my god, there's so many good lines.
The hip agents. It's like they're just fucking shooting from the hip. They don't know what the fuck they're doing.
No one's good at anything.
Yes, no one knows.
Except the like, I feel like all the bank tellers are like.
But even them, they get roped into this drive to want to participate in spectacle.
Yeah,
right?
That's true. Yeah.
You know, so it's just like kind of everyone's along for the ride and nothing is neatly hemmed in.
Yeah.
It's just everything is a goddamn mess. And
yeah.
I I don't know. I love the music because I think that it it makes us it's it's very interesting for a movie that is so much about spectacle, um that it helps us zone into like really being present
Right.
in
Yeah. Yeah.
almost naturalism, right? Like it kind of has that one opening scene that's like you're in a movie and we're setting the stage, but then it really hones in and feels as if you're supposed to be present in the
Yeah.
action in a naturalistic way, and I think the song helps do
Kind of,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
focus you. Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that I want to mention is I love this movie, and as I was watching it, I realized this might be in contention for the movie that I've seen the most in my life.
Wow.
Because when I was a budding little film boy, at like 13 or 14,
Film boy.
I was like, I'm sure anybody can relate, but like you want to have, like you listen to WTF with Mark Maron, and he's like, "Who's your guys?" Like that. Like when you're a teenager, like you want to have your guys. Like the movie, and like I remember Dog Day Afternoon being the first movie where I was like, "This shit is awesome," and also like it was made in the 70s. My little friends, I was gonna be the cool guy that like their favorite movie was the 70s movie Dog Day Afternoon. So when I was 13, 14, watched Dog Day Afternoon like a million times. All that to say is there are moments that are just burned into my brain that like make me giggle and laugh, and there's some lines that I've realized like, oh, that's where I say that from. Specifically, oh shit, now I can't remember. When she says like, "I'm a Christian and my ears aren't made of garbage cans," like I love that. But yeah, there are like moments that I just love so much that are just little character moments, and the first one that like I can see perfect. I close my eyes and I can see it perfectly because I love it. So yeah, the movie does open up with them like walking into the bank, and I guess the plan is that John Cazale is going to put the gun on the bank manager to keep him calm, and then Al Pacino is going to kind of run the show, and he walks in with a giant box. That has a rifle, and when it comes time to like take the rifle out,
I love it.
he has this like fumbly bumbly like can't get the rifle out, and like it's just burned into my brain as like one of the funniest like nonverbal moments in a very serious moment is him fumbling with his box to get the rifle out.
The movie is pretty funny.
It is hilarious.
And
yeah.
I think it's there are times when that's in service of the absurdity, which is not like laugh out loud chuckling, but is like feeling the tension and contradiction
Right.
in a circumstance that no one can box their way out of.
Right.
And then there are times where it's funny and I'm like, feels like tonally for me, not that it's like bad, but that I don't know that it would be played this way if it was made contemporarily.
Right. Yeah.
Because of the nature of the content.
Yeah.
So it feels very of its time, and I don't mean that like in an offense that it's being offensive, but just that I don't know that it could be made in the same way.
If it was, it would be like, oh, Seth Rogen as the Al Pacino. Oh, he found a joint in the cash register. Like that would be.
It would have to be a comedy as opposed
right.
to like
a drama
that
is
has
really
funny elements in it. Also, I wanted to say, since you talked about this is in contention for one of your posts, this was the first time I've ever seen this movie.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, well, lucky for you. I mean,
Yeah.
did you like it?
I did.
Yeah,
I did like it a lot. It was different than what I anticipated, and a big part of that was the tone.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting something that was more of a straight shot drama.
Yeah. So yeah, they go into the bank. They begin the robbery. Oh, another thing that's burned into my mind because I love it so much is when his and literally my wife and I say this to each other. I'm gonna say minimum once a day. Is when the driver bails and he comes back and he's like, "Hey, there's a girl under the desk." And Al Pacino comes, hey, Squirrel, hey, Squirrel, come out from under there. And do you know who Squirrel is?
It's Carol Kane.
It's Carol Kane, yeah. So, but yeah, I love, hey, Squirrel, get out from under there.
Yeah, there's a lot of great
famous
actors,
people. Yeah. His dad,
this.
did you see who his dad was? Is Dominic Chianesi? I don't know if I'm saying that right. Who's junior from The Sopranos?
Oh shit.
Yeah. Does a great. I think he has like one line where he says, shit, what is he? He says something. It's a really funny line where he says, God damn it! I wrote it down somewhere because it's so funny. It's literally like one of his only lines where his mom's like crying on the phone when she realizes it's him, and he's like, "Why would you rob a bank when you got a sucker for a mother?"
There's also the guy who plays the lead cop.
Oh, Charles Durning.
Yes.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, last night when I was, poking around, I was like, oh my fucking god, this is Pappy O'Daniel.
Yeah, from Oh Brother Art Thou.
Yes, I've seen.
Them boys is miscegenating.
Yes.
Oh Brother Art Thou I've seen a lot.
Same. I love that movie.
I do too.
Yeah, that's.
We should do that movie. That would be like a good dark horse because there is a lot of great Yeah, especially us being from the South and
one of my favorites. Very sidebar, but one of my favorite. I personally think they're full of shit, and I think it's total bullshit. But one of my favorite film, I'm gonna call it a myth. I don't know, whatever stories around film is the Coen brothers claiming that they never read the Odyssey.
I don't
before
buy that.
they wrote.
There's too many things that are
It's
direct references. Yeah.
Well, they're not claiming that it's not based on the Odyssey.
They're
they
saying they never
claim
read
that
it.
they never read it.
Okay.
Which I call bullshit. That it's too perfect. But I love the idea.
Yeah.
Like if it's true, they're genius level off the charts. But
God.
yes, he plays Pappy O'Daniel.
Yeah, he does. God, now I'm just thinking
really
of hilarious another drama with Oh Brother Art Thou might be more comedy, but
I mean, I would say it's an epic that part of what makes an epic is that it can transcend other narrative forms and embody a wide variety of different tropes and narrative elements.
I love that whole movie, but I love when they get on the little push cart with the old man, and he goes, "I seen a cow on the roof of a house." Just the way that guy talks to them, the blind guy pushes a cow.
He's that movie was watched a lot in my household growing up.
Oh, that's a good mom, dad, grandpa,
particularly
aunt, uncle
my
movie.
dad. Particularly my father loves it a lot, and we also used to listen to the soundtrack.
Hell yeah,
a lot. My brother, sister, and I sang some of the songs in church. As children. Yeah, we should do that movie. God,
hell yeah, it's good.
I haven't watched it in a minute, but I will say the number one thing I quote. I was trying to think of this earlier, now it has occurred to me. The number one thing I quote from that movie, and you've probably heard me say, I may have said it on this podcast, is the RUNNOFT. When they're sitting.
RUNNOFT.
What'd she do? She RUNNOFT.
Oh yeah.
And then the kid's like, "Oh, she run off? Where's she run off to?" But my family says that all the time. Yeah.
I say she loved him up and turned him into a horny toad. Yeah, that movie's hilarious. I love that movie.
Oh God, Tim Blake Nelson's so great in it. Okay,
yeah.
We will need to do that.
Yeah, hell yeah. So the robbery goes further afar when Al Pacino burns some of the records. I can't remember what he burns.
So here's the thing: he's burning the ledger.
The ledger. That's right. Yeah.
But watching the film, with a close eye, I don't think that that's actually what elicits suspicion. I think
the first guy that approaches
that, and then also the phone call that the bank manager has, where he just goes,
"It's for
yes,
you." Oh,
yes, and slams it. I think that it's intended to demonstrate that they're bumbling idiots that don't know what the fuck they're doing, but that them being caught was an inevitability. Right, it's just the accumulation of all the various ways in which they're going to get caught. Yeah, exactly.
But them thinking it was because of the fire leads to a great John Cazale line read, which is a line that isn't funny or isn't in itself great, but his delivery is great. Is he just looks at Al Pacino and goes, "Why'd you have to light the fire?" Which is so good.
There's a breathy. He was running.
Yeah.
And he's out of breath.
He's constantly sweating and out of breath.
just getting his ass beat by life.
Yeah, so it immediately goes south. Cops show up. It becomes a spectacle almost immediately. And then we very quickly realize that, first off, we're not sure what Sonny and Sal's relationships are, other than that they're both kind of like low-level criminals that got thrown into this situation.
Yes. So that is something that I do think is illuminating about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff. And it's not, of course, a film stands alone, and also you can situate it. So, like, I think the ambiguity with internal to the film's universe is intentional. Also, there are interviews where John Watsnick, or however you say his last name, says that Sal was gay.
Right. Which I think the movie is cagey about as well, because when they're saying that there's two homosexuals in the bank.
Tell him, clarify.
Tell them they got it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, great in those moments too. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's like interviews where John is saying he never said that wasn't true. Like, he was gay and he wouldn't have, he wasn't denying it. So, but I do think that the ambiguity is intentional because it also creates a lack of stability of understanding of like what's his motivation. Like, we know theoretically what Sonny's motivation is and why he's engaged in this action, but like, why would Sal be invested in this very stupid fucking decision?
Yeah, and I love that they never really tell us. Right. And I think the most clues you get is that he's a bit of a simpleton, and Sonny probably manipulated him. Because in that moment where they're like, Sonny's like, we're going to get a helicopter. And he's like, I thought you said we either get away clean or we kill ourselves. He, like, clearly there's, like, a hint there that Sonny was, like, this dude's
just
gullible.
Saying whatever he
and
needed
he was
to
just,
say.
he needed a body to help him rob a bank. And
Right.
he was going to tell this kind of sad moron anything he needed to hear.
I think the ambiguity also makes his death a little more tragic in terms of internal to the writing of the film.
Yeah.
Because we don't know why he's been compelled to do this. And so the open possibility is just inherently kind of sadder, right? Like, we don't know, was he just finagled by Sonny? Was he actually really invested? Did he have some personal investment in what Liz's outcome was, or what Leon in the movie is
he also
named?
Could just be a sociopath too,
right?
Because there's that one scene where he's like, "Oh God." Like John Cazale,
like, are you gonna let me shoot somebody?
well, the way he says it at first is like, you think he's this. He goes, because like Al Pacino is playing it up to the cops. He's like, if you don't get me what I want, I'm gonna start throwing bodies out the front door. And Sal goes like, hey, were you serious about that throwing bodies thing? And you think he's gonna be like,
don't say
that,
up,
man. And then he's like, because I'm fucking ready. I'll
Let's
do it.
go.
And it's like, oh
Let's
shit.
fucking go. Yeah. Right. But I think like the tragedies of like this just throwaway of a life.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, kind of both of them. Like.
Yeah.
And I think, well, we'll get to it, but the like dictating the will at the end, I love. Is so
yeah,
good,
it's a great scene. But it's like I think there's like a different writing of this film, right? Where Sal's character is like, yeah, we got to get your girlfriend or your wife, the language obviously they use.
Yeah, he's the
very
sidekick
of the
with
period.
no like nuance.
Right.
Yeah.
We gotta. Yeah. Or he could be. I think he is quite nuanced by not knowing what he's doing, and they could eradicate that nuance by having him be like, yeah, we gotta get your girlfriend this money, dude,
yeah.
or like, like, yeah, I am gay and I'm in support of there's a way of like making his characterization much more narrow, and by just leaving it kind of ambiguous. Is he just a psycho? Is he emotionally invested in this?
All of the above in some weird So
it's like when he gets shot at the end, it feels like the unanswered questions feel more tragic, I think.
Hey, this is Craig from the editing room floor. Just wanted to say that at this point in the episode, Hal's mic just up and quit on us. So you're going to hear her voice. I've tried to make it a little bit easier to hear, but it is going to sound a little bit distant, but there's not much left in the episode, and you can still hear her, so no complaining. Just enjoy the conversation. Just kidding. Love you. Thank you. Bye. So one thing I do want to talk about is one of the more famous sequences of the film is when Al Pacino leaves the bank for the first time and really starts playing to the crowd, and that's when he starts screaming Attica over and over again. An obvious reference to the Attica prison riot, which in relation to the movie, which the movie takes place in August of 1972. The prison riot had happened in September of 71. And it was a bunch of prisoners at the Attica prison in New York who launched a prison rebellion where they held the prison for 4 days. And in the end, 40-something people were killed, 30-something prisoners, 10 guards, all of which were killed by the police, except for, like, 3 prisoners and 1 guard or something like that. But I love that moment because it is a moment of, like, Sonny realizing, like, he has this command, like, this populist command. Like, Sonny knows how to work an angle, and, like, he knows... Again, like, he's clever, he's not necessarily smart. Like, he knows, he recognizes... He's a hustler. Like, he recognizes, like, he is a man...
Wrestler.
Oh, a wrestler. I thought you said a hustler, but, like...
He is also a hustler.
Yeah, either way.
Means, like, he is working the crowd like a wrestler.
Yeah, for sure. But I like, that scene is great, and I love it, and it just also hints at, like, kind of how directionless Sonny is, and that he just, like... Again, he uses what's expedient to him. Like, he is aware of the Attica prison riot and, like, probably sympathizes with them in a general sense. But in that moment, he's like, well, general sentiment is in their favor. Let me compare myself to them and, like, win this crowd over.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's being politically expedient, but I also think there's something we said for the ways in which, like, mass politics operate on synecdoche and metonym, where it's just like things become circumstances, names, places, become stand-in
for the struggle of the moment.
Yeah, just like the struggle of the working people,
right?
In a broader sense. And so I think some of it is him being shrewd, but I think some of it is just him being jazzed up that there are people supporting him and needing to be imbued with confidence to like take his next step. And it's like, so he can be like, this is our shared struggle is fuck the cops, right? But like, people weren't saying fuck 12 in 1972.
Right.
So Attica is his fuck 12. Like, yeah, we're all in agreement here. Fuck the police.
And he is aware of, like, the optics of it, because at one point he says, like, I'm going to go out with a woman that has kids because cops don't like it when it's in the paper that they shot a woman with kids. And then after the first time he goes out with a hostage, every other time he goes out, he realizes the optics of the situation. And when they're like, oh, I have the crowd on my side, they're not going to shoot me. I can just parade around and, like, without a hostage in front of me. And, like, he is very savvy in those, like, in how to deal with, like, the public optics of it.
Right. And he's also emboldened by the sense that they're on his side. Yeah.
And then we start getting to see how the media and the press play into it. And one of my favorite scenes, which is when the reporter calls Al Pacino on the phone.
The TV reporter.
Yeah, and he's just annoyed that he has questions for him. Like, it's so good. A few of the things they go, why are you doing this? And he goes, what do you mean, why am I doing it? I'm robbing the bank because they got money. Why else would I be doing it?
And also I mean, I love he starts interrogating the TV reporter on how much money he makes until the guy hangs up.
Yeah.
You know, that there is, even if it's oriented towards achieving his own goals, which do not serve the broader, class or the people or however you want to conceive it, he does. I don't think that's put on. You know, like, I don't think it's fake what he says in that interaction about, like, what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to go get a union job?
Yeah, I'm not a union member.
I don't have a union card.
Am I going to work at a bank? Is one of them. He says, he's like, how much do you make?
Yeah. So, like, there is some really, again, kind of thinking about that naturalism that we were talking about earlier, there is some naturalism on the level that, like, working people's solidarity and class consciousness just arise naturally.
Right, yeah.
from having those experiences.
Yeah.
And I do think there is some of that happening in this movie.
Yeah. And my favorite part of the interview on the phone with the bank is when after the guy asks like a third or fourth question that he doesn't like, he looks at the hostages and goes, "What's with this guy?" Which I love.
Right, like he has more solidarity
with
the
them.
People he's holding hostage.
Which comes to fruition because like we see them later like playing little games and like being buddies and friends and things like that. Yeah, I think it is about like the working class solidarity of like, it almost seems like all the hostages are more, they're like annoyed. They're not scared. They're like, yeah, we get it. Can we get this over with? Almost. Yeah, once it settles down. Yeah.
They're on his side, basically.
Yeah. So yeah, this is when we start to see some of the. It's played very like low key. Why they did this? Was there a plan? But then there's that great scene where Sal says for the first time that like, I thought you said if we were either gonna get out clean or kill ourselves, and Sonny kind of moves the goalpost. He's like, well, we got a helicopter that's coming, and then later it's a jet, and like he keeps having to like convince Sal, and Sal like, John Cazale plays it with like every time he's like changing the scenario, John Cazale is clearly like, there's no way we're getting out of this, like it's just all over his face. And then one of the greater moments, he says, we could go anywhere. What country do you want to go to? Where's a place you dreamed of? Wyoming.
I did read that was improvised.
By Cazale?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
That not the whole interaction, but that his response was left blank in the script, and then he improvised.
That's great, because there's a callback to it later when like Sonny and Leon are having that very serious conversation, and Leon's basically like, what are you doing, Sonny? And he's like, I don't know. I'm robbing a bank with a guy that thinks Wyoming's a country. Which is a great moment. So yeah, we get that moment, and then we start to see like the crowd. We see more instances of the crowd kind of on his side until Maria's boyfriend jumps out of the crowd and attacks him. To which Charles Durning, the cop, says like, you know how those Hispanics are. So we get that moment of real coppery in that.
Yeah, and like there's also it's not quite defensive othering because the cop is doing it, but like Sonny's receptiveness to that interpretation is defensive othering, right? It's like pushing aside another group or pushing them down, relatively speaking, to your own experience to maintain your position. So like he's pretty eager to just kind of accept whatever narrative the cops hand him so that he can maintain the trust with him that is necessary to continue the enterprise that they're engaged in.
Yeah. He orders pizza in a great pizza sequence. I love that
they turned on the beer.
Oh, that's so good. I wrote Charles Durning's line because Charles Durning on that line goes like, Sonny's like, we want pizza. And he's like, yeah, pizza. He goes, and a case of beer. And Charles Durning goes, yeah, no. It's best we stick to soft drinks, is his line. I love that so much. It's good.
That's what, Coke?
Yeah, Coke. Yeah. And then the pizza boy comes and like Al Pacino insists on paying for it with the bank robbery money and then starts throwing the money around like, oh, God.
Oh, related to the bank robbery money, I want to say that is something that is different from real life, is that in the movie they say that there was $1,100.
Oh wow! Yeah.
In the vault. In real life, they got almost $40,000 pulled from the vault. So I thought that was an interesting decision to make narratively, is to make it way less money to, I think, amplify the insanity of their decision-making process, right? They feel even more desperate.
So we get constant reference that Sonny wants to talk to his wife, and at first we get kind of a cutaway shot of this kind of frantic person who, like, Sonny would never do this, and it's his... With the kids and all that. And then later it's revealed that might not have been exactly who Sonny was talking about, because we finally see Leon, played by Chris Sarandon.
This is one of my least favorite things in the movie, is like the gotcha
Oh, the fact that like
it's in that.
Yeah,
I think is really not
the like. Oh, we weren't talking about this wife. We were talking about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, just framing it, and that was something that I didn't expect, because, again, not having seen this film before, being aware of the circumstance, and the general lore, right, around kind of queer history as an odd story in queer history. I already knew that he was not straight, or that there was some, that he had a relationship with a trans woman based on seeing things on, Twitter and Tumblr and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so it just read to me as very cheap. And it's a very gotcha moment of trying to be like, aha, I bet you didn't expect that Al Pacino had a relationship with somebody who thinks they're a woman. And
Yee. Yeah, and I will say that I feel like they do give Leon, though, a lot of, like, respect in those scenes. Do you feel like the movie itself is respectful to Leon?
I mean, I don't...
Like, Chris Sarandon is playing it very...
So I think it's hard, because obviously we have the issue of a cis man playing a trans
Sure,
woman.
yeah.
We have a historical lens thing going on here of, like, the language that we would use now is not the same language that we would use then, and it is very, not just possible, but as is mirrored in historical documents, right? There are people who we would now use the language, or now would identify themselves as trans women, that would not use that language then, and would call themselves something that we would not call them now, right? Or that they would not identify with now. But I think my biggest issue is the Chris Sarandon as a cis man playing a trans woman, specifically related to the fact that the documentary Disclosure that's on Netflix, it's about trans representation in film. In it, they talk about how Elizabeth Coffey Williams, a trans woman who was in several John Waters films, especially like early on in John Waters' career, was considered and discussed for the role, and ultimately they decided that she was too pretty.
Oh, that's funny.
So that, like, the cis man of it all, and then, like, it being set up as a gotcha, like, it being set up as a surprise, I don't love. I do agree that when Chris Sarandon is on film and threading this very tough, small needle of how do you play someone that is in a psychiatric ward due to an attempted suicide attempt, not make them into a total clown or flat archetype, and express, and frankly, their relationship is what the narrative tension of the film rides on, even if we don't know that initially. Yeah. And I think that is done about as well as it can be, but I do think ultimately the fact that we don't learn of her until halfway through the movie is being done with the intention of
making it a reveal rather than like a character thing. Yeah, I can see that for sure. Shit, I feel like there was something else I wanted to say about the Chris Sarandon thing, and I don't remember what it was. Yeah. Oh, I did want to say that the TV reporter that says that Sonny now has various factions of the gay community, which was just the phrasing that the TV reporter had said was very funny. Various factions of the gay community.
It's very kind of them to acknowledge that there are a
variety
of experiences
right.
Groups of people within the gay community.
So we start kind of like, I do think there's a stark shift in Sonny after he talks to Leon. Like, it seems like after Sonny talks to Leon, he realizes this is not going to end well, no matter how much I convince myself. And they start kind of negotiating the eventual escape, which the plan is to have a limo show up and pick them up and take them to the airport that's going to fly them to anywhere, including the country of Wyoming. Or Algeria, because they have a Howard Johnson's, which is, that's the great line that he says to, like, Leon is basically just trying to be like, oh, that's what I was going to say, is the thing I love the most about Leon and Sonny is how Chris Sarandon plays it as like this person that clearly does not like Sonny, realizes Sonny is like toxic and terrible, but also feels bad for Sonny for being like such a fuck up, and like there's just so much like nuance in their feelings about Sonny as a person. Like she basically says like, yeah, he beat me, he did this, he did that, he's a great father, and like there's just something like that character is so conflicted, and those moments are really great. I just love those moments.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is really interesting about their relationship as it ties into the question of spectacle that the movie is so interested in, is like the compelled or impelled maybe visibility of queer identity, relationships, and experience that, like, you know, Leon didn't ask to be thrust
into this. Yeah.
And, you know, Sonny has forced that upon her,
right,
while claiming
to be doing it for her,
right, to be like doing a favor for her. And so I think, while at the same time, like, you know, she wants that she wants the outcome, but the pathway that Sonny has chosen,
and she references that because one of Sonny's lines is like, I'm dying here, and Leon says like, you always say you're dying, Sonny, and you're just killing the people around you or whatever, which is a great line.
Like she's being sacrificed at the altar
of
his ego,
and
like,
she's aware of it too, which is
solve this problem.
All right, so I'm just gonna go into like the drive to the airport sequence and everything. So we get to, nope. Got to turn myself off in the background. So we get to the point where we know any plan is going to go bad, which is when Lance Henriksen shows up. And Lance Henriksen shows up as the driver that's going to get them to the airport. But before that, I do want to talk about one of my favorite sequences, which we did mention earlier, which is Al Pacino dictating his last will and testament and like kind of trying to make a whole lifetime of amends in like 5 minutes, which is just a great moment. Do we love it? Do we not?
It reminds me a lot of just like classic deadbeat dad behavior.
Yeah.
You know, like of sorry, listener, we're down to one mic, so but it reminds me of classic deadbeat dad behavior, where it's like this idea that you can rectify decades plus of lack of support, lack of emotional presence, lack of centering someone that's not yourself in a really short period of time. There's just a desperation that smells really specifically of masculinity. Yeah,
I just love like how Pacino plays it, and like clearly a guy that realizes like, I've just been a fuck up my whole life. I guess this is the end. I guess I'll try to be as good of a person I can be with like the last few things that I can do. Like obviously we know that he's not the one that ends up dying, but it's just such a great scene. So then we get the drive to the airport, which is just great filmmaking. There's very little talking of the whole crew. There's a great sequence where they like all huddle together to get into the car. And if you pay very close attention to John Cazale in that moment, it's so funny because he's just being like perfectly befuddled as they're huddled to the car. Like John Cazale's just kind of looking around like, eh? And then Lance Henriksen is the FBI agent who's the driver who keeps telling John Cazale, hey, do me a favor, Sal, point that gun up for me. And it says it like 4 times, so you know something's coming. And it's just the play between Pacino and Cazale, where like Pacino is starting to think like, maybe we're gonna get away with this, and he even asks like, what kind of food do they got on board? And then the cuts, like John Cazale's never sweatier than he is in the back of that limo, and just the constant cuts back and forth between Sonny, who thinks maybe we're gonna get away with this, and Sal, who like knows deep down they will not be getting away with this. And when they get to the airport, they pull up this very quick maneuver, like done in a second, where one cop grabs Sonny's rifle, and then Lance Henriksen turns and shoots Sal in the head, and it is over.
Yeah, I think this really speaks to how fucking stupid Sonny and Sal are, because the primary key consideration when you're doing something illegal or spitting in the face of power is to never give up what power you have. And the power that they had was Sal keeping his gun carefully trained in a very specific direction. And it's just the complacency that comes with stupidity and having the first few steps of your request fulfilled is that Sonny's like, oh yeah, it'll be fine. Like we're in the limo already. We're here. You know, what else could we ask for?
We did.
Yeah. We've achieved it. And it's like, no, dude, you have to stay vigilant and keep that mechanism of little power that you have active at all times.
Yeah. So yeah, we reached the end of the movie with the inevitable conclusion that, yeah, this was never going to work out, and Sal ends up dead. We know Sonny is going to jail for a while, and it ends on that kind of a downer. I love this movie. It's one of my faves. One of the movies I've seen the most. This and probably Die Hard.
That's a
unrelated.
That's a collection of movies.
But yeah, do you have anything you would like to add?
No, I'll just say I think this movie does a good job of encapsulating a spirit of the people's resistance that isn't connected to a political movement, right? Like, it's not like Sonny is not mobilizing collectively to make a political statement like the Black Panthers say outside of banks with their guns, right? In San Francisco, what happened previous to this. But it's an encapsulation of like a misguided class consciousness that is roving, that's just seeking a place to land. And it is connected to real people's concerns, real queer people's concerns. But ultimately he fails because he's not plugged in to a network, because it's not collective action, because he doesn't have networks of support and strategy guiding his actions. And yeah, I agree. Like I said, I don't love that the existence of Leon is treated like a gotcha moment, but aside from that, it is a really beautiful piece of filmmaking.
Hell yeah. Well, we will leave it there for this week's episode, and we will be back. I know this week's episode will probably go up a couple days later than normal. We like try to get them up on Sundays, but you know, life happens, all that stuff. But we're going to be back in a couple weeks, and this was great. I love doing podcasts with you. This is so much fun.
Fantastic.
Yay. The end.
Go,